Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining me today for creating the ultimate tech brain, visualize and integrate everything for smarter IT management and development. We're really excited about this particular session today because we know that techies have joined the call today. If you're a technical person, a digital person, we're going to show you what building the brain is all about. And it doesn't matter what type of techie you happen to be, whether you are an IT specialist or if you are an engineer, maybe you are a web developer or a graphic artist, or maybe you're just a social media specialist and you are really in tune with all of the latest gadgets and gizmos and technology that's out there and constantly evolving. This session is for you because we're going to talk about bringing all those disparate information sources together and creating a techie brain that is really on specific topics or tasks that you may have. So I'm going to be using a lot of different examples today. I've got network maps, I've got troubleshooting procedures and business processes to map out, as well as some different ways of using graphics and visualization of topics and mind maps within the brain. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to start today's session a little bit differently than the way we typically do. I know that this is a more advanced group and in a more advanced topic, so I'm going to dive right in with a new brain from scratch. I'll real quickly talk about just the base behind the brain, how to create thoughts and content. But we're going to start right away by not actually using an existing brain, but starting with a very brand new brain. So I'm going to click on, I'm sharing my screen, I've got the brain open, and I click on File and select New Brain. And the name of my new brain is quite simply going to be IT. And notice that when I create a new brain, I have the option of including a brain template. These are some built-in templates that we've created at TheBrain Technologies. They are sort of vanilla topics. So obviously it doesn't have actual business names or places of education and things like that. It's a general overview of the type of brain a business would create or educational institution would create, whether you're a student, a teacher, or what have you. And in this case, obviously, I'm going to select the option for IT management. So let's go ahead and take a look at the pre-built brain that the application is constructing for me. It takes just a minute because it's populating many thoughts, thought types and tags as well, different ways of classifying and identifying groups of content, groups of thoughts within your brain. Those are all populated as well for you to use. And what this allows you to do is either use the brain as a seed for your own construction of your business environment, or you can simply use this as a sandbox. If you're new to the brain and you just want to get familiar with the technology, this is a really great way to get started. And you don't have to choose IT development. You can choose one of the many other categories that are available to you in our brain templates. We also have some brains available, sample brains available online. I'll be talking about those a little bit later in today's demo. But now you can see I've created my new IT brain, and it's pre-populated with a lot of great content that I can use to modify to reflect my own business process, delete content that I don't need, or add on in areas that I'm most interested in. So first, let's go ahead and just review this particular brain. Notice I've got an area for active projects, and I'm going to be coming back into this area later. I'm going to rename this thought for IT Implementation A to an actual project name and start developing some content in this area of my brain. I've also have business strategies and IT goals, so IT research, business processes, best practices. A lot of contents can go into those areas. My IT assets, obviously I'm going to be keeping track of all the different hardware, my software inventory and library. I've got a full network map we'll be reviewing as well. And I'm skipping a thought here because I'm coming back to that in just a second. Notice I've got key user groups. I always want to know, not only what servers I have and where they're located and what the passwords are and what the information about that, the content on the servers is. I also really need to know who's using that server. If that server goes down, who's affected, who's responsible for maintaining the server, who has access in case something goes wrong. So there's a lot of additional pieces of information, as you IT specialists know, that go behind a server rather than just simply knowing how to get it online and what the passwords are. And the brain is a great way of visualizing all of that information. So let's go ahead and jump into help desk and user support. So this is an area that's important to me. I'm managing my help desk and my user support team. So I've got a lot of links to different areas that I can start flushing out with this new brain and start developing. I can go right into desktop support issues and start keeping track of those, dragging and dropping documents. I'm going to jump over into recurring issues because I want to share something with you really quickly. Maybe I'll even go into troubleshooting. Here we go. So in troubleshooting, let's say I go down to issue C. Again, these are some vanilla thoughts that you can either delete or rename, but we just want to share with you the examples that you can have to map out your issues or your business processes. So in this scenario, we have our troubleshooting processes, and we've got several different issues that we're tracking, and below each one of them we'll have a link to the common solution. There may be more than one solution. There also may be more than one category that issue C is affecting. Notice it follows under troubleshooting process, but it's also linked up to the area of known issues. I'm keeping track of all my known issues or important issues versus just the troubleshooting process for common issues that happen. So just a couple of different classifications that I have. And obviously, you're free to rename those thoughts as well. And we're going to go ahead and do that now. But before I do, let me also point out that sort of the structure of the brain. Anytime I click on a thought, as you've noticed, that thought comes into the center of the screen and displays all the related information around it. So my brain is constantly updating and evolving as I navigate to give me all of the focused information that I'm most important, that is most important to me. We have a few different types of structures of displaying the brain. We'll be getting into those as well, but we typically call this normal view. You have the active thought in the center of the brain above the parent thoughts. So in other words, this was a subcategory. These are its parents. And obviously, they can have more than one. And down below, we have what we call child thoughts, the subcategories of those thoughts. You may have noticed on some other thoughts elsewhere in the brain, I can also have a jump thought, something that's closely related. Let's say for issue C, I've got an IT developer, Barb, that is a specialist and really knows how to fix this problem right away. This is a troubling machine problem that we're trying to repair on all of our field representatives' machines, maybe an upgrade to Windows 10 or something like that. I'll use that example later. Barb knows all about it, and so I simply have a link of jump thought. She doesn't own the issue. She's not technically the solution. The solution is maybe a software upgrade or something, but she's closely related to this issue because she's so knowledgeable about it. So I have her linked there as a jump thought, something that's related to the active thought. Now, it's up to you as to when you want to create a jump thought versus a child thought. And I should point out that you can always go back and change that relationship. So you do not need to, once you create a thought, you don't need to delete it and recreate it somewhere else. You can relink it elsewhere in your brain. I've moved Barb below issue C. I can move her up above or to the left and really find the proper link that I liked for Barb. Barb might be linked to many different things in the future, so I can also click to highlight the link between Barb and issue C, and I can actually edit that link. So I can say Barb is the specialist. So I have her as a specialist with issue C. Maybe she's affected by issue A. It's a problem. So I'm going to link Barb to issue A. And once again, I'll edit this link. Oh, and thank goodness for spell checking. I missed an F there. Affected. So issue A has affected Barb's machine. However, Barb is a specialist for issue C. So I'm actually identifying the relationship between thoughts. I just wanted to point that out really quickly. Not a lot of examples of link types and modified links in this particular brain. I'll be showing more tricks of the trade that you can do with link types in another demo in just a bit. Let's go ahead and add some more thoughts to see how we can really flush out a particular issue that we're troubleshooting. So let's say under the troubleshooting process, I want to create a thought for maybe we're having network printer issues. So I simply create the new thought and hit the check. And let's say I want to identify this as an issue. An issue is a thought type. You can see I can hover over these thoughts and see that they're all issues. In the future, I might have issues under projects that I'm working on, or people are having issues on their machine, so I have the issue linked directly to that person. So I won't have one thought that says issues and all my issues appear in that location. They might be peppered throughout the brain. And that's a great example of when you can use a thought type to just identify the content of that thought. You can run reports against those thought types or filter your searches. And it really comes in handy to have just that nice visual display. So I'm going to right click on this thought I just created and set the thought type. And notice this is the populated list of existing thought types that comes in this demo brain that we unpackaged when we first started this particular brain. So these are pre-built thought types that I can use specifically geared towards the thought types that an IT manager may use. And of course, this is an issue. So I flagged that as an issue. It inherits those properties. And now I can easily see that this is a network printer issue. I might also link this to an existing thought. So I'm going to type in, I've got an area for network support where I'm keeping track of all the network support issues that may be coming up, and obviously the networking printer is one of them. So I simply want that to fall under network support issues as well. So I double click, and you'll notice that any time I start typing in a few letters, here I'll just type in the letter B, and all thoughts that contain the letter B will show up and appear in front of me. And this pop-up list, my existing thought list, is really helpful with reducing clutter and duplication of thought names within the brain. Barb, for example, she's a great IT specialist. I don't want multiple thoughts for Barb throughout my brain. I might go to the wrong one in the future. I want one thought for Barb. Anything that she is related to that I need to keep track of is going to be linked within my brain. So I can keeping track of all the issues she's having in her workspace or on her machine, as well as what she's capable of fixing within my department, etc. So I'm going to link Barb, again, as a specialist for the printer issues. I can label that link if I want. I'll right click and edit that link again. So she's also a specialist here. And now I can start bringing in all the different solutions for this particular issue. So let's say whenever we're researching our network printer issues, we need to check the cables. We also need to check their internet connectivity. So I'll just say internet. Maybe there's a couple of different patches or potentially an update to DLL. So notice in this scenario, I've typed in multiple thought names and separated them with a semicolon. That's a really, really great trick. If you're just getting started with the brain, I highly recommend remembering this particular trick, the semicolon trick. So you can quickly type in a group of individual thought names, and these will now all be individual child thoughts of printer issues. But before I hit the green check, as I'm setting up the thoughts, I'm going to set up a thought type. So these are all possible solutions to the network printer issue. And now I'll hit the green check, and notice they inherit that solution value. So checking the cables, internet. I could even number these, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that we have a business process. We start with checking the cables. We move on to checking the internet connectivity. They've got the latest patches, the DLL, etc. let's say the DLL is a temporary fix. I'd like to show you now how I created these thought types. As you can see, the thought types are incredibly useful for identifying the thoughts. So let's go ahead and create one so you know how to create a new thought type. Again, you can modify the existing thought types that we have for you in this, this brain example, but of course you always need to know how to add new ones. First, I'm going to open up down below. As you can see, I have them minimized right now, but down below you can see I've got an area to enter notes for all my individual thoughts, and this is where I can keep track of thought attachments we'll be bringing in just a moment, run reports, etc., and there's a tab for thought types. So these are all of my thought types. Obviously, I can click on the plus to create a new thought type at any time. But what I like to do is actually right here from the thought itself, I typically will right-click on the thought, go over to thought type, and select to create a new thought type. So this will no longer be a solution. Let's say this is going to be just a Band-Aid or a temporary workaround. So I don't have a thought for that, a thought type for that yet, but I want to identify all of my temporary workarounds just so if I share this brain with someone else in the future, they know that this isn't a permanent solution. It's not going to fix the problem. Maybe every time they reboot their machine, they have to reinstall this DLL for whatever security reason. So it's a temporary fix until they get the correct patch. So I'm going to set up a new thought type, and I'll just name it Band-Aid. I like that term. Band-Aid, A-D-E, there we go. How do I spell Band-Aid? There we go, Band-Aid. So this is just a simple Band-Aid patch, and for Band-Aid, I am going to actually right-click on the thought, and I'm going to modify this particular thought property. So I want to change the color of the thought, but specifically, I want to add, maybe I'll do this on the thought tab down below. For Band-Aid, I want to click on the little plus sign to add a thought icon. Now, the brain has over 1,500 built-in icons, and they're really, really great for just quick visual identification on the content of a thought. This is a server. This is a patient. This is a specialist. This is a customer. However you want to identify your key user groups or topics or processes, this is a great way to do it. So I'm actually going to go into the medical area. I've got many different folders here, and one of them is medical. Again, this is pre-built into the brain application. For any brain you create, you can utilize these. And of course, there's the Band-Aid right there. I prefer this little medical box. I think that looks nice. And so I've selected that, and I can even color code this as well. So for Band-Aid, the thought type, again, I can go to my list of thought types and click on any one of these to activate it and modify these changes on the Thought Tool tab. So now I'll click to change the color, and let's say we want that appearing, that's a little too light, as a nice red, just to really make it stand out. This is a temporary patch, but it will fix the problem if you're in a pinch. And so now let's see how this looks when we're looking at our network printer issues. Very quickly, I can see there's a couple of things to check that could be a key solution and resolve this problem permanently. But if I just need a quick patch, and maybe I can have more notes on the details of why this is a Band-Aid, will need to be reinstalled every time you reboot your machine. So a couple of details there. I can timestamp that so people know, hey, this patch is from pretty recent. It's probably going to work. If you're looking at the timestamp, and the timestamp is just a great little button that appears there in the Notes tool window. If that's timestamp 2011, you think, well, maybe this one's kind of old. Let's try some of the other ones first. So I really, really like the notes area of the brain. I'm not focusing on the notes area too much today, but that's actually one of my favorite features of the application, just because every individual thought within your brain has its own unique notes tab. It's like an ongoing journal for that thought. So I can keep track of when this patch worked, when it didn't, what discussions or meetings were had about this particular patch and why we're using it, etc. All right there, preserved for me for all time in the notes area. And again, I've got just greater context about this process. For network printer issues, In the past, before the brain came along, maybe this was in a binder on my desktop. Here are the steps to follow. Here are the people to contact. Maybe I had information in emails or other data sources or files. Now I've got it all right here in the brain, easily accessible to answer my questions for me so I can remember these. There's going to be dozens of them over time. I'll be able to find the information because it falls into many different categories within my brain. And of course, if I'm having any trouble at all, now I also know that I can quickly contact Barb, who is a specialist in this area. So let's do this again in another area of this brain, but let's start using some actual documents and content, existing content, or creating new content from scratch to help us troubleshoot further areas or keep track of more IT information. And for that, I'd like to go over to an area for desktop support. We talked about this earlier. And let's say some of the desktop support tasks that I'm keeping track of are specifically upgrading all of my entire team, my entire business to Windows 10. All the PC users need to upgrade to Windows 10. I think there's still a free upgrade to Windows 10 through July. So Windows 10, maybe everyone is already upgraded and we need to do some Windows 10 training. I've been seeing people looking to, how do I do this? How do I click on that? They're a little unfamiliar with the layout. So great, I'm going to create an area of my brain for some Windows 10 training. Now, I'm going to start off, a lot of the resources that I need are already out there in the world on the web. So the brain has a really nice built-in search feature. I can just simply click on F4 on a PC. I click on F4 and I bring up this search web feature. You can also simply click on options and select search web, so you can do it manually. The brain has some great built-in search engines, but you can edit to select what website you want to use. The brain is always going to use your default browser. Now, I'm getting into an area now where we're going to be talking about adding file attachments and different types of digital attachments to thoughts in the brain. The brain doesn't decide how to launch those attachments. It's the same as double-clicking on a link from your desktop. The operating system decides how to open a .xls file or a .doc file, or in this case, a .html file. So I'm going to be doing a search. The brain will use my default browser, and it will go to Google to search for the current thought name, Windows 10 Training. I can modify that if I'd like. But this, as you can see, launches my browser and with the criteria of Windows 10 Training. And it looks right here, we've got a nice link from Microsoft, obviously for IT professionals. This is perfect. So maybe I can have a video do the job for me, or at least I can get everyone started by saying, hey, watch this first, and you have any questions, then get back to me and we'll take this a little deeper. So this is a great link. I want to be able to email this out to members of my team at any time. I'm simply going to drag and drop the URL right into the brain. And that makes a really nice shortcut directly to that thought. So it goes directly to that particular URL. You can see it's downloading the URL information. And I've got a nice link right in my brain to access that at any time. I can even rename that. I'll just call this the MS Training Video. So I can get back to that particular attachment at any time. I can also, let's go back to our search results, and I'll just do that one more time. Let's say I find some additional information in the search, and my browser's going a little slow. There we go. So let's say we find some more Windows 10 updates. So that's also a fantastic link that I want to preserve, and it's got some information about training after the Windows 10 update. Again, they've created some great information that I want to preserve, so I've got a nice link there as well. So a couple of quick links, and you can see their particular web page had a Favicon, and so I've got the Favicon showing up right there in the window. Anytime the web page has one, the brain will do its best to utilize that Favicon for the link as well. So I've got a couple of nice training video links there for me to use. I can bring in additional web pages at any time. And again, I can link this to other related areas. Let's say along with our Windows training, 10 training, we're upgrading everyone's machine to Windows training as well as to VoIP. Now, first I want to link this particular thought to, this is one of my recent IT goals to get this project done. And so I think I have a thought, there it is, business strategies and IT goals, make sure everyone is up and running on Windows 10. But also under desktop support, I'm going to create an area for VoIP. Now, instead of creating a new thought, let's jump back to the first area that we looked at under active projects. So here under active projects, again, this falls back on the template that we first gathered or selected from that list of drop-down templates when we created this new brain. This is just some vanilla implementation A, implementation B, C. You can delete that content, or in this case, I'm simply going to rename it and repurpose it to fit my needs. So rather than IT implementation A, we've got a whole new VoIP rollout. Everyone gets upgraded to Windows 10. We've got a whole new VoIP system in the office that's going to be great once it gets implemented. And this actually lays out my steps. So I've got technology planning, my requirements gathering, development feedback, production and rollout. So all the documents and contracts and things like that along the way. I've got specific areas where I can link and attach them in my brain. So I also like to, from time to time, identify a business process by using the brain's thought tags. And a thought tag is something you can actually apply more than one tag to a thought. So let's say we really need this VoIP up and running by Q4. So this is a Q4 project. I'm going to check that. And it's also urgent that this gets completed. It has to be ready by Q4 sooner rather than later. So I'm also going to tag this as urgent. And as you can see, the tags appear in the brain, and I can apply more than one. So even though it's already set with a specific thought type of an active project, I can also see that there are attributes. It's due in Q4, it's urgent, and as more attributes come up, let's say I've got an upcoming meeting for this. I've got that I need to schedule or what have you. I'm just going to click on the plus sign and need to do some scheduling. Oops, and if I could spell today, that would be great. There we go. So there are some scheduling steps that need to be attended to as well. So I'm keeping track of scheduling different projects throughout the brain. And anytime something needs some calendar focus and assistance, and the brain has its own built-in calendar as well, which I don't think I'll be talking about too much today, but just so you know that it's there. But this needs some attention in that category as well. And anytime I complete that task, great, the new event was added to my calendar. I can go back to the thought tags and simply uncheck this from scheduling. There's no more scheduling focus needed. We're on track, and the other tasks are all laid out for me in the notes down below. So I've created that existing thought. Now I'd like to bring some content in. So I've got VoIP, all my different technology planning. I'll start there. And I have some existing technology planning for VoIP here on my local drive. So I'm going to open up my business folder here. And here you can see I've got a lot of different content, documents and so forth that particularly apply to VoIP. And I'd like to share not only two, but many different options for bringing content into the brain. First and foremost, there's always the drag and drop. So let's say I've got a document, product comparisons. We're comparing all the different VoIP carriers and products that are out there today and compatible phones for desktop, a desktop phone that launches right into VoIP. So I've got this product comparisons document that we're reviewing. I can simply drag and drop that right into the brain. Now, the default for dragging and dropping a document into the brain is to create a shortcut back to that original. I'd like to point out that that can be changed in your preferences. I can go into my brain options and preferences and very easily make the drag and drop of files rather than linking to actually moving the files into the brain. Now, I can leave it as linked, and I have a shortcut for moving the file into the brain. Here's my driver procedure update. Let's say everyone's going to have some new drivers on their PCs to make VoIP work through their headphones. In this case, I'm going to hold down Control-Shift and driver procedure update, this is a Word document, I drag and drop it into the brain, and notice that it no longer resides there in that particular folder. That file has been moved into the brain. Now, the reason why we give you these options is because no two environments are ever the same. Maybe you're working over a network, you've got access to your X drive that's collaborative, that's where everyone puts their shared schedules and documents and invoices and so forth. And moving those locally into your brain would restrict other people's access. So therefore, a shortcut might work best. Whereas if you are always traveling, you're on the road, sometimes you're not even online, and you need client information and contracts and documents and so forth as you're about ready to step into their office, an internal attachment in your brain on your laptop would be the best option for you. Now, of course, you can have both. I can have a shortcut to the original for project comparisons. And instead of dragging and dropping below, I'll take this project comparisons and drag and drop. This time, I'm just holding the control key for product comparisons because the control key is a copy. Now, on a Mac, that's done with the Alt key, so there's a few key differences there between Mac and PC. But notice I've got two attachments on product comparisons. I'll look at the Thought tool, and I'll see I've got a link to the one on my C drive, and then I've got an internal attachment as well. So anywhere my laptop goes, this file is going to go with me. If I sync this brain to the cloud and download it to another machine, the internal attachment will go up to the cloud and be accessible online. It's accessible from my iPhone, from any mobile device, my Android. But it's also going to be accessible from other machines where I download that brain. So my home laptop, my home MacBook, I can actually sync to the cloud and download that same brain and still have access to the internal files. From my MacBook, I'll see there's a shortcut to CE Solutions. For you Mac users, you know that doesn't even make sense. So the link will still be there, but it won't work. It won't point to anything on another machine or from my iPhone or Android. So therefore, an internal attachment is going to be the file. And that's what I personally choose to do with all my attachments. Please know that you can go back at any time and right-click on an attachment that you accidentally moved into the brain or that you only linked but you meant to move it into the brain. I can right-click to move a file out of the brain on an internal attachment, or I can go over to a shortcut, right-click, and move file or copy file into the brain. So you can, once again, always go back and modify how you've made those attachments to different thoughts in your brain. Another option for bringing content into the brain is to create it from scratch. Let's say I've got a document where I'm comparing the top two vendors, and this document doesn't exist yet. I want to create it so I can share this with my decision-making team so we can move forward for the requirements gathering. So I've got top two vendors, and I'll create this thought. But once again, there's no existing Word document or Excel spreadsheet to bring into the brain. So in this case, I'm going to right-click and select to add an attachment. Now, the list that pops up here, these are installed applications that the brain has recognized. If you have a particular file type that you would like to be able to quickly create within the brain, or maybe it's an existing Word document but with your company letterhead or with information already filled out that you just need to fill in the blanks. For that, you would actually click on Templates and just follow these on-screen instructions. You're going to be dragging and dropping a pre-built file into a directory, and the brain will always recognize that as a file template. In this case, I don't need to do that. I'm going to select an existing type, which will be a Word document. So this opens up Microsoft Word for me, and this file is already saved. I could close it right now, and it wouldn't ask, do you want to save? Where do you want to save it? This file is already saved internally in my brain. Now, I should point out that when you're saving files in your brain, the files are not compressed, they're not zipped up or compromised or renamed in any way. When you're creating a brain, there's a .brain file and an _brain folder. That folder is a mini database that's being visualized in the brain application. And there's a directory in there called files where all of your internal attachments will reside. So even with the brain closed, and since we're a techie group here today, I feel comfortable talking about sort of the back end, what's going on behind the scenes within the brain. Even with your brain closed, I can do a search or a spotlight search for my Mac or search right here on my C drive for a file called top 2 vendors. And even with my brain closed, I'd still be able to find this Word document. Because again, it's not renamed, it's not compressed or zipped up in any way. So here are my personal choices. And I save that information. Doesn't ask me where to save these changes. That file is saved internally in my brain. So I've got easy access back to that particular file at any time. So we've done quite a few different scenarios with bringing content into the brain. I've built a brain from a brain template that is available when you install the application. Renamed a lot of the content. I can go through and delete some content. I haven't done that yet. And then I'm going to move on to importing. So deleting, I'm just going to cover really, really quickly, since a lot of the times you'll see, if you are using a template, implementation C, implementation B. You don't need these thoughts within your brain. You can rename them, again, down here on the Thought Tool tab, or I can simply right-click on a thought and select to forget. Now, forgetting a thought is the equivalent of throwing something into your recycle bin. The thought isn't permanently deleted. It's still there, and it can be revived from the forgotten thought list. So I'm going to go ahead and select forget, and then I'm going to go to options, and I'm going to select show forgotten thoughts. So there's IT implementation C. Let's bring that back to life. You can see it's kind of grayed out there, but it's still there, still retains its links, and it would still have any attachments or notes associated with it. So I can remember that thought, or from that same pop-up window, there was nothing to show in the pop-up window, so it auto-closed. I can obviously permanently delete it. There's a shortcut for permanently deleting. There's actually 2. You can go in, again, to preferences and say, let's forget the forget option. When I right-click on a thought, I want to go straight to delete. It's a safety net, so I usually leave it there. I leave it on, and if I know for a fact, implementation C, this is one of my vanilla template thoughts. I don't need it. I can permanently delete it. I simply hold down the Shift key and I right-click on implementation C, and I go directly to delete. So the forget option has morphed into delete simply by holding the Shift key. And I can permanently delete it. There is a confirmation window. I say OK, and that thought is permanently gone. So really easy to delete the content that you don't need. Back in VoIP, let's say under technology planning, I have a whole series of other documents that I need to bring into the brain. How do I do that? Once again, I can start dragging and dropping. I can hold down the Control Shift to move the files into the brain. But I can also import a folder directly into the brain. And there's 2 different ways to bring folders into the brain. So first, I'm going to actually go ahead and go to the folder. Here it is, my VoIP research. Now, if I simply drag and drop a folder into the brain, it's going to visualize, by default, it's actually going to visualize that folder for me. And that's a nice little link, and I can click, and poof, it opens up a folder. So it's a nice way of creating a link to a folder within the brain. And we can actually go into our options and take this one step further, and I can visualize the content of that folder. It's a really, really great way to get up and started with the brain to visualize your information quickly. But there's a few caveats to that in that they're not going to be indexed. These are called virtual thoughts, what I'm about to do. So show the virtual thoughts. So now I'm visualizing all the content of my VoIP research folder. So you can see I had 2 subfolders in there. There they are, feedback and providers. And on VoIP research are all the attachments. So FAQ, list of issues and concerns. Those are all displaying as attachments here. So I can still easily visualize and access that information. The great thing about these virtual folders is that if I create a new folder, so we'll call this latest research. So we do some further research. Maybe we're finding more vendors or more information about this. It'll take just a second to refresh, and there it did. So I've got a new folder, latest research, and whatever shows up in that latest research will be reflected here in the brain. So it's virtually showing you everything that came from that original folder. Once again, if I sync this to the cloud, the other folder that it's virtually emulating obviously is not going to go with it to the cloud or to other machines. So this would not appear on another machines. And also the virtual thoughts are not indexed. So when I do a search within my brain, I'm not going to find that content showing up in the search. So two things to keep in mind. For that reason, I like to import folders into the brain. So let me share that with you now. I'm going to go back and actually remove that VoIP research. So right click, and I'll just go ahead and forget it. I could have shift right click to delete the thought. It doesn't delete the folder that it's visualizing. It just deletes the thought for a virtual folder. And now, rather than just dragging and dropping from technology planning, I'm going to select File and select to import. So techies, here we go. Look at all these great import options that you have. I won't have time to cover them all today. We've had special webinars in the past specifically on importing different data sources. And you can go back and look through those in our previous recordings on our website. But I will share with you really quickly just to show you an example of how quickly it works and how great it works. Here are all the different file types. I'm obviously selecting a folder, and I can navigate to where that folder resides, which is up inside Solutions. And there it is. VoIP Research is the folder. So I'll save that. Are you sure? Yes. And then it's actually already done. This action will import. Okay. And the import takes place. And there is all my content. Again, any folder becomes a thought, and the documents become internal attachments. And these were all copied into the brain. So when I did that import, they were not moved into the brain. So as you can see back on my desktop here in the folder, they're all still there. But now I've imported that into the brain, and the brain is where I'm going to maintain this content moving forward. So that anytime I sync my brain to the cloud, the files go with it. And anytime I sync this to another machine, the files will be there on the other machine as well. So that's my preferred method for doing these imports of data sources into the brain. And so with that, I think what I would like to do is to open another brain to talk about those views that I discussed earlier. And for this, we'll talk about, again, we're staying on the techie subject, but now we're looking at the network map. So now we're talking about all of our servers and the passwords and access to those servers and where they reside and what machine names are and so forth. There's quite a lot that goes into keeping track of a network within even a small business to a large business. On a small business, you still need to know what's the server name, password, which rack is it in, which slot, is it on the back office, in the front office, etc. Large organizations, is it in Hong Kong, is it in Los Angeles, who has access to it? A lot to keep track of. And it's so nice to be able to visualize this within the brain. And for this reason, I'm jumping into a brain specifically for a network map. I've changed the names and passwords and server names, etc., to protect the innocent, because I actually created this network map years and years ago to help me keep track of all the different servers in our office. I am not the IT director here at TheBrain Technologies, but I like to help out in any capacity that I can. So if I can get passwords to a server that goes down and reboot that server without having to trouble our IT director, then great, I'll take care of that. Or if I need to notify the proper person, I have that information. And the IT director isn't flooded with calls all day long about servers that are going up and down here and there, or what have you. So here I am in the network map, and I'm just going to click down to Applications, and we'll go into CRM apps, and we'll go right into Remedy. And we'll take a look at what we're seeing. So first off, we're on a Remedy, which when I mouse over, I can see that's a thought type. That's an application. And down below, just a quick note, Charles has full access. There's his phone number and contact. If I had access, I would have instructions about how to log in, what my password is, etc., right there in the notes section. I've got some documentation down below, so if I need a little bit of training help or what have you with Remedy, all that information is easily accessible. But I'm going to minimize this now. I'm going to actually minimize the tool tabs. I like to click on the button, upper right-hand corner, to minimize the Brain's tool tabs. Right now I'm not focused on the notes or running a report or the thought types and tags. I'm just focused on Remedy and how Remedy fits into my business. And rather than staying here in the normal view, I'm going to click the plus sign. And notice on plus, I can see 2 generations away from the active thought. So Remedy DB, that's the database that Remedy is using. I can still see Remedy's child thoughts down below, and that Remedy is being utilized by the IT Support Center. And up above, Remedy falls under APS-01, which is in Los Angeles. So again, I'm seeing 2 generations away. That's just a real quick option that you have to click on that plus sign, and we call that the quick expanded view, so 2 generations away. But I'd like to do a more detailed expanded view. So for this, I'm going to click on the button and change from normal view to new expanded view. And now it's up to me where I want to place the information on the brain. And of course, real estate is king here, so the more real estate I have, the better. In Los Angeles, there's my APS-01, which is hosting this Remedy database. I can see that it's also hosting the ACT database, which our sales representatives are depending on. So that is connected to CRM apps, which is Remedy that our IT support center utilizes. So here's a scenario. Let's say Los Angeles, prone to some earthquakes out here from time to time. We have a little rattle and the server goes down. So suddenly I'm noticing from my remote office in Chicago, gosh, the Remedy today doesn't seem to be working. I better notify the IT support center. They're going to want to know about this when they come into the office in Los Angeles. And the first thing I check is the Remedy DB. The Remedy database isn't online. That's being hosted on the APS-01 server, which is online, but it recently went down. It needs to be rebooted, or some services need to be restarted. Also on APS-01 is our ACT database, which our sales representatives need to know about. So I also need to include the sales representatives in this email saying, hey, everyone, we had a little scare. Everything's going to be fine. We'll be back up and running in the next 10 minutes. So the Brain's links have actually helped me to better understand the problem, how it all fits together. And in this scenario, I never even needed to call the IT support director. I was able to handle it myself with the help of, I think if I go back down to Remedy and expand that, Charles had access to the Remedy, and he and I together were able to resolve this particular scenario. So maybe in an upcoming meeting, I'm going to want to talk about this with a couple of other team members, like, hey, our Los Angeles office is really, really dependent on this APS-01 server. Maybe we need to break that up a little, move a few of these applications over to other locations or mirror them in some way so that they've got a backup system. So I want to save this view. This view was really helpful for me for this scenario. I want to save this. Maybe I can take a screenshot and send it off to my boss. But we've got a meeting later today anyhow. I want to bring this up during the meeting. I'm going to go up to View and select to save my expanded view. And I'll simply call this the earthquake scenario. So that is saved as earthquake scenario. Now my day-to-day business goes on. I go back to, we can look at outline view. Outline view is a much more linear layout, but once again, you can see I've got the bigger picture. I can click on the little plus sign to expand a particular thought to see all of its relationships, or if I hover over mail res and click on the little minus sign, the collapse, it collapses that column. So I can do that at any time. It's just another great option for the big picture of how your department or your project is working. But for day-to-day, I really like to stay in the normal view. Now it's time for my meeting, earthquake preparedness. Let's talk a little bit about our servers. Matt had a special presentation to share with everyone. So I'm sharing my screen, and rather than go into normal view and click expand to recreate that view, I'm going to go up to my options or up to my views rather, excuse me, and load an expanded view earthquake scenario. And there's the exact view that I loaded up just moments ago. Wherever I put any individual thought, as soon as I save that content, that view is preserved for me. So in the same brain, I can load up, here's my Los Angeles view, here's my Hong Kong view, here is my Australia view, etc. So I can jump in and out of different views in different meetings to see the big picture in that area of the brain. So with that, I also want to open up one more example brain. And let me point out at this point, too, that this particular brain is available for download online. If you go to thebrain.com/apps, APPS, you can actually download our network map. And this next brain that I'm going to share with you as well, the engineering example brain. This is a really fun brain. A lot of information in this. Let me go back into the normal view here. A lot of information in this particular brain, and again, a lot of people like to use this as the seed and the starting point for their brain they're creating, because this brain does have a lot of links to existing companies for research and understanding of new technologies and new software. So let me just give you a quick guide here. Development tools, a lot of different utilities that are very popular with IT development and engineering development. Let me go back over to implementation projects, infrastructure. You can see a lot of different categories, web browsers, popular web browsers, links to their websites, and HTML rendering engines, other related things. Also linking up to a lot of people within this brain as well. Who's responsible for that type of technology? Let me go down into programming language, object-oriented programming. So if you're just getting into programming, you're trying to make yourself even more a techie than what you currently are, and you want to learn all about C#. We've got some great tutorials, links, more information obviously developed by Microsoft, and it falls under different categories as well. Functional programming, static typing, object-oriented programming. I couldn't think of all this off the top of my head. I know a little bit about C#, but with this, I can obviously see much more and better understand how it works, where it comes from, and what it's capable of doing. And also, this is what I wanted to show in this brain. Debugging expression trees in Visual Studio is a nice little link. And you can see I can mouse over, and now I'm not seeing just a tiny little icon about C# or whatever the subject matter is. I actually have a nice screen grab right there on the screen. So whether you're screen grabbing code, and I do this from time to time, I'm by far not an absolute coding expert. But I do my best with being able to copy a little bit of code here and there and piece it together to get done what I need to do. I think that's a pretty common procedure. I've got links in my brains to common coding sites to help remind me, how to type in different languages and so forth. And this screen capture is a really, really great way. You see a little bit of coding that you like and you don't want to type it all out character for character. You could do a screen grab. Let's jump over to another area. I'm going to go back up to, let's see, object-oriented. I guess I'll just go over to, let's say we're working on project issues and new user interface for a console page. So I noticed this was in here earlier, and this is just a little example with setting up mock-ups, issues that you're keeping track of. It's all going to be done in HTML5. So once again, I'm starting to get the big picture. But most importantly, let's just open up Word. I want my new user interface, the console, to look kind of like Microsoft Word. And I just want a screenshot of that. So when I'm sitting down with my developers and they're saying, well, should everything be real round buttons and a straight column? No, no, no. Across the top of the screen, very Microsoft Word with drop downs. So let's have a screenshot of that. So I've got Microsoft Word open in the background. And I'll just type in for the thought, sample screenshot. And I right-click on this particular thought and select, in this scenario, to capture a thought icon. Now notice My screen is sort of grayed out now, and I've got these red crosshairs. That allows me to click and drag to select a box of whatever size and shape that will be the screen grab for this thought. So I'm going to go up and drag and drop. There it is, Microsoft Word's nice little button console at the top of the screen. Very detailed, very well laid out and organized. And now I can just simply mouse over that thought to show, hey, everybody, this is what it needs to look like. So that's a really, really quick way to get some content into the brain. I use this often not only for code, but just for the screenshot of a web page that I like. I don't need the link to the web page. I just want to create a web page that looks like that web page or has the same features or layout or colors. So I'm often grabbing graphics that are enticing and interesting that I'll be using for my projects. And the Brain screenshot is a great way to do that. And also in support, here is the problem. I'm working on this new feature for our application, and here's the error that I'm getting. And it's a paragraph long. It's just an error message. You know that typically you can't select the text of an error message to paste it into an email. In my Brain, obviously I'm archiving this error message because I'm troubleshooting it, trying to figure out how to fix it. I simply take a screenshot using the Brain. So I use that right click for this new error that I'm getting, capture thought icon, the error's open in the background, and once again, I'm just clicking and dragging. In this case, now I'm overwriting that last screenshot. Do I want to overwrite it? No, I'll keep the old one, so I'll hit cancel. But I take a quick screenshot, off it goes into an email, and I'm on my way. Two last components I want to share with you. I see that we're almost right on the hour, but I talked earlier about the link types, describing the relationship between thoughts. We had that great area of our brain where we had the problem, the different solutions, the key solution versus the temporary solution, the different people that are affected. And I had those links talking about this person is affected by the problem, this person is an expert in the problem. So it's really nice to apply those links. And you saw how I did that. I want to show you one more example of how those can work. And for this particular brain, I am going to jump into a brain called Scout Systems. So Scout Systems is a sample brain that I was playing around with there. You saw a few little coding details in this sample brain that I've been working on engineering and modifying. But this particular brain, as you can see, if I go into my distributors, there they are, distributors, and I've got a thought called new client procedure. Now I stripped this down. I've showed this in demos and other times in more detailed demos, but I've stripped this down really just to the basics to give you a quick overview of how those not only directional links, but links that can identify which direction, which path to follow in a large structure. So this is helping me work through a process and is really great for training. If you're training people on your business process, first the bugs are entered into Bugzilla or Jira, and then they're signed off by this department, and then they're tested by this department, and so on. And what happens if it doesn't work? Everything rolls back to step 1 or step 2, what have you. And that's exactly what this does. So in this case, it's a new client procedure. How do we sign on these new distributors and new clients? Well, step 1, there's only one way to go. We have a face-to-face meeting with this client. So obviously down in the notes, steps on contacting the client, scripts on what to say, what to share, how to set up the meeting and confirm it. And when the meeting is done, was it a success? And here I am at the crossroads. Yes or no? I've got two clear paths on which direction to go. If it was a fantastic success, I'm sending them a non-disclosure agreement for them to sign off on so we can get going with the contract. If not, then I need to finesse. How do you finesse? Once again, the files and attachments down below will help me with that. Pre-built emails that I can send out. And obviously, my next step is a 2-month check-in. Once again, we're back to yes and no. No, I'm going on to the 1-year check-in with further instructions. If it's yes, I circle all the way back to that thought that I saw at the very beginning, signing that non-disclosure agreement. We're moving on from there. We're into contract territory. Were there any disputes? And notice contract and disputes are linked over to Betty in the finance department. If there are serious disputes or serious questions that I can answer, maybe I just need a quick answer, like is there a due date or something like that, Betty's the person to talk to, and I can get right back to my client. But if there are clear disputes, I don't like it because of this, then I need to follow the no link or head over. Are there disputes? Yes. Go to the legal. No disputes? No, they're a full-time distributor, and I move on to client and customer training, which has other further documents. So you can see the yes-no sort of guided me through that process to get me to where I needed to be. Again, a really, really great procedure specifically for training. And the final component that I wanted to share with you today is everything that I've done here today has been on my local machine and is available from this PC. I'm going to be working from home this weekend on my MacBook, and I need to work on this particular brain, so I am going to sync this brain with the cloud. So I say okay, and this brain starts going up to the cloud. Let's go ahead and jump, and it actually went very, very quickly, as you can see. So let's go ahead and jump into the brain cloud, and I'll log in. I thought, oh, there I am. I'm already there. So here's my account page. That was the login. From the brain, upper right-hand corner, click on Login. Once you've created your account and downloaded the brain, you can sync to your cloud account. And there are different tiers available for you as well. You can go into, if I go back to the brain store page, version details. Which version of the brain works best for you? Check that out under store version details. Maybe you can get by with using the free version of the brain. You can still sync brains to the cloud, but you're limited on the type of content. There's Pro License, Pro Combo, and then finally Team Brain. I'll talk about that briefly in just a moment. But here are all of my brains, and if I refresh the page, I'll see that the brain that I just created is going to be uploading. So it's not on my account page. Let's see if it's there. So the brain that I just think, there it is, Scout Systems, it's still uploading, but it's probably available for me. I'll go ahead and click on it. So that same brain that I just walked through, that yes-no procedure, is now right here available for me online. So this is a brain that I am interacting with through a web interface. Here's the exact same brain back on my desktop. I can still add new content right from the cloud. I can click and drag to create new thoughts. I can click edit down below to modify the notes and the content down below as well. And most importantly, I can access that brain from my iPhone, from my iPad, or from an Android device, and even sync it up to another computer. Or upgrading to Team Brain services allows me to actually share this brain with other users. I can give Patrick access to this brain so he can continue on adding additional information. And I won't go into all the benefits of Team Brain, but I will say really quickly, it is a great way to collaborate on all of your digital information. And in the reports, you can run a report. As you can see, I'll turn on the modification details. And it's actually going to tell me this is a brain that I am sharing. It's going to tell me who who modified the last thought and when. So I'll see that Matt Caton modified a specific thought versus thoughts modified by Jeremy or by Patrick or whoever I happen to share the brain with. Some really, really great features for collaborating in Team Brain as well. And with that, Patrick, I'll ask you to come back online. I'm sure the questions panel has been filling up. I saw a few pop up, but I wasn't able to actually read them as I was demoing. So Patrick, let me know if there's any questions that we didn't get to today or that we would like to cover before we wrap up the session.
Sure. So one question from Jeffrey was, how would you remove a virtual thought or folder?
Sure. So a virtual thought you will always see show up as an attachment. Let me go back to my local brain. So here's my local brain, and I'm going to grab a folder. I'll just make a virtual thought and then delete it really quickly as well. So to do that, I need to, I'll get into my VoIP research, and I'll just grab a folder. So here is providers. I'm going to drag and drop this into the brain. So notice that down below it says providers. There's that virtual thought. But because I have virtual thought turned on, to remove a virtual thought, obviously I can go up to options and into preferences, And there's sort of a two-step process, and this I think is the easiest way. First off, turn virtual thoughts off. Right there in the UI button, user interface, in your preferences in your brain, and say, okay. Now notice that that shows up as a folder attachment, a link on the thoughts where the virtual thought was appearing. So what was the providers was the name of the virtual thought that was appearing down below. Now that I've unchecked that feature, instead of seeing the virtual thoughts being displayed, all the folders and subdirectories and so forth, instead I see where the link to the folder was created, and I can permanently see, if I know, hey, I never want to see that directory again, virtual thoughts. I tried it to visualize some things really quickly. Now I know I don't need it. Step 1, turn off virtual thoughts from your preferences. Step 2, come back to this thought and right-click and delete. I'm actually not deleting the folder. I'm deleting the shortcut to the folder. As you can see, the folder is still there, providers. But I've removed the shortcut. And so that step 2 is optional. Maybe you still do want a shortcut to the folder. You just don't want to visualize it. Go right into preferences and uncheck that box on the UI tab.
Great. Another question from John was, when you're looking at a thought, his question was issue C, for example, earlier on in the presentation. Mm-hmm. How do you decide how much linking to put in between that thought, like to not overclutter your thoughts? He says that he has a problem with too much clutter and too much linking.
Right. We have an entire webinar on that process. We typically call that gardening. And every spring, we hold a webinar called Spring Cleaning, Gardening in Your Brain, and how to clean that up. There are several different options to doing that. And just really quickly, what you can do is create some holding thoughts. So under technology planning, let's say there are several steps underneath there. And now I've got dozens of documents down below, and I need to clean it up. So under technology planning, there's my research, followed by prices, and followed by, we'll just say, meetings. So I'm creating 3 categories that everything will then fall into. Now I can go into meetings and say, all right, the top 2 vendors, we've had meetings with those. The VoIP research, that goes into research. So notice I'm just clicking and dragging, so it's no longer connected up above to technology planning. Now it's in one of these subcategories. And product comparisons, that falls under prices. And we'll just say driver update procedure falls under prices as well, since there's going to be cost involved with that. So I had 4 thoughts here. Now I've cleaned them up, and I've got dozens more on the way. So instead of scrolling through all of those thoughts, dozens and dozens of thoughts down below, now I have 3 subcategories, and I've just simply redirected how they're going to appear and where they're going to appear in the brain. That's one option that you have. But we do cover a few different options, again, in our gardening webinar. So really quickly, I will share with you, if I can jump back over to our website. And I was going to show this at the end of the webinar regardless. If you go up to our community, and there it is, Recorded Event Archive. So on the Recorded Event Archive, scroll down, and there it is. It wasn't too long ago. It was back in May, Gardening Evolving Your Brain. If you can watch that video, we take a whole hour to talk about just specifically that purpose, cleaning up clutter within an aging brain or a brain that is quickly evolving and you need to just touch things up a bit. There's some more fantastic examples in that recording.
Great. I think that pretty much covers it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed today's webinar just because we jumped right into some of the more technical aspects of the application. So thank you so much for joining me today. We also have another webinar coming up that is closely related to sort of the techie world. This is going to be a little bit more about people networks. So we're going to be talking about all the different social media sites, bringing those into the brain, how the brain directly integrates with Twitter searches and can be linked to Facebook and Acts and contacts and so forth. So some more very, very helpful information that we'll be focusing on that webinar. And of course, some great resources on our website as well. And every Friday, we host a Brain 101 class. So Brain 101 is where we take it really back to basics. Today, I started and got right in with some details. Tomorrow's class will be step-by-step creating a new brain, creating individual thoughts, adding attachments, covering the basics that you need to know. So if you joined today and thought, wow, this might be a little over my head, there's a lot of different features and capabilities, tomorrow is a great way to sort of come in from the shallow end and get started building a brain. And you'll see how quickly you can build a really significant, really powerful brain in just a matter of minutes, getting started from scratch, thought by thought, rather than the pre-built template brains that we use today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Great job, Patrick, on the questions. We had a lot of questions coming through, so we really enjoyed that. And feel free to contact us. Patrick and I both are available at support@thebrain.com. Send a note anytime. We'd love to hear from you. Have a great week, and most importantly, enjoy your brain. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.